Hello and welcome to Mirror Fighting One to Watch. I'm Rich Jones and today I'm joined by heavyweight Nick Campbell, who turned his back on a professional rugby career to try out boxing and has now turned professional, looking to see how far he can go inside the ring. Nick just obviously turned professional, but it sounds like a fascinating journey you've had to get to this point. So I just want to go right back from the start, really. So obviously growing up in Scotland, I'm guessing what was life like for you, sort of growing up? And I guess rugby was the first sporting passion, was it?
Football, believe it or not, is my first sporting passion. Growing up in Glasgow, you either support one or the other team. It was always my dream to play for Celtic when I was a lad, but I wasn't any good, so I ended up turning to rugby. Got involved with a local club, Alan Glens, played through all the age groups with them. Alongside that time, from about 9 years old, I did box. I did go to a couple of amateur clubs around the city. But when rugby started to get a bit more serious when I was 14, I binned everything and just focused on playing rugby. Went through all the age group systems in Glasgow, Scotland, up to Scotland U20s, where I played in the World Cup for them. Off the back of that, I got my first contract at the Glasgow Warriors Academy. Then spent 4 years, moved on to a full-time professional contract with them up until 2013. Went from 2013, signed for Jersey Reds over in the Channel Islands. Played 4 years there, nearly 100 games for them in the English Championship. Then just coming to the end of my last season, I kind of felt I wanted to, scratch the itch. I'd always had a passion for boxing. My grandfather was a professional boxer. My dad boxed when he was younger. It was always a kind of real interest of mine. So I decided to give up rugby and take the plunge and see what happens.
Yeah, and you mentioned when you were growing up, you were sort of boxing at amateur boxing clubs, and then obviously the rugby took over. Was it a pretty sort of obvious choice to kind of focus on the rugby at the time? I guess that was the one you were having the most success at. Was it tough to give up boxing at the time, or was it kind of an obvious choice?
I always loved the sport. I always loved boxing. I used to watch boxing when I was younger. I still obviously watched boxing all through my rugby career. So it's always been something, I've always had a passion for it. I've always been interested in it. But yeah, I suppose it was tough. But just at that time, I mean, you know what amateur boxing can be like. It's not very organised. It depends what club you're at. And I had all this stuff going on. We're going through pathway systems and district systems with rugby. And I suppose, I was kind of excelling in that to a certain extent. Or that's what it looked like I was going to be, was doing pretty well in. So that was the main reason for it, really. A lot of my friends played rugby and stuff. A lot of my friends boxed as well, but a lot of my mates and stuff at the time were all playing rugby, and it made sense for me at the time just to continue with that.
Yeah, and I guess it obviously did go pretty well, the rugby career. Just tell me a bit about some of the highlights of your career. Obviously playing for Scotland under-20s. You mentioned going to a World Cup with them. That must have been a pretty proud moment for you.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, some of the guys that I played with, and that Richie Gray, who's still a very good mate of mine, he plays for. He's just been announced in the Six Nations squad for Scotland just now. Played alongside him in the second row, and we had grown up together, playing all the age group stuff. Then you're in Tokyo and Japan. We played Japan in front of 30,000 people. That was pretty amazing. Do you know what I mean? At that, I was only 19 years old at the time, so it was very awestruck with the whole experience. Obviously, when I signed pro with Glasgow, my debut was actually in Belfast, where my manager, Mark Dunlop, is based now. I played at it was Ravenscraig then, but now the Kingspan Stadium against Ulster for Glasgow. Came off the bench for 20 minutes. The following week, we went down to Leinster. I managed to score a try that game, and we ended Leinster's. It was like 27 unbeaten game streak, so at their ground. So that was a pretty big moment in my rugby career, I suppose you could say. Then obviously I signed for Jersey, where I still live now. I'm still based in Jersey. That's my residence. I've kind of, like I said, the interesting thing is as well, I've nearly played 100 games for them, made loads of, I see Jersey as my home now, but if it wasn't for playing rugby in Jersey, I would have never met Mark. Because Mark used to live in Jersey, believe it or not. I think he stayed in Jersey for about 20 years. And I met him through a mutual friend over here. Bumped into one another and got a chat to him, kind of discussed with him that I was thinking about, chucking the rugby and going for boxing. And he said, look, we'll go and get as much experience as you can. You have obviously been a professional athlete all these years, so you know what's required for training and sacrifice and dedication and everything. So I went and done my 4 years amateur, and then he said, once you've got enough experience, we can have a chat. And then here we are today. So that's a big journey, I suppose, but it's all intertwined, and without the rugby I wouldn't be here. So it's cool. It's something different, I suppose.
Yeah, how long was it sort of playing on your mind in the latter years of your rugby career? How much were you thinking about, the fact that you had this sort of itch to get back into the ring?
I had started actually boxing, going to a kind of box, because you don't train every day. You have a kind of down day, but I like to keep myself fit. So I had started going to a boxing fitness class, boxing business over in Jersey with Alan Murray and Ben Murray. And Alan, who's now a really, really good mate of mine, came up to me and he went, "Son, you're not bad, you ever thought about it?" I says, "Well, I obviously I'm a rugby player," so kind of that planted the seed a wee bit. And then I'd done some sort of more one-on-one stuff with him on my down days, just to, a bit of extra fitness. And that was probably about the second last year of my contract. Then going into the last year of my contract, I kind of had fallen out of love with the sport. And I kind of ramped up my rugby training a bit, my boxing training. And I started going up to Alan twice a week sometimes, whenever if I wasn't playing that weekend or we had a day off, I would go up and just do a wee half hour on the pads with him or whatever. And it kind of built up to a case of I had a few different offers on the table from different teams. Another team in England or a team in France. Jersey had kind of briefly spoke to me about signing another extension on my contract to stay for 5 years, but I just decided that, if I was going to do it, I wanted to do it for the right reasons, and I'd kind of lost my spark for the game, and I had this real passion to have a go at boxing. When I initially started boxing, even though I had spoke to Mark and everything, my goal was just to win a Scottish Championship. It wasn't to do anything else. That was it. I just wanted to try and do that and see where it took me. But obviously it went a wee bit better. It went well. It went good. So
yeah. And what are the first steps you take then when you obviously the rugby contract ends, you sort of decide you're going to go into amateur boxing? I mean, how do you sort of go about then starting? I mean, obviously when you box from young, you sort of go from the amateurs, you go through the ranks, but you just start from sort of almost from scratch at, in your 20s. How did that process begin then to getting into the sort of properly into boxing?
So there was obviously was training with Ben and Alan up at Boxing Business. I then started training with Dave Lund and Ben Harden down at LH Fitness, another gym in Jersey. Ben used to actually box pro. He was ranked second in England at one point, amateur, just behind Audley Harrison. Dave, pretty similar. He was in the top 10 rankings as well as an amateur. He never turned pro, but started training. They were two big super heavyweights as well. So kind of started ramping up my training a bit. I'm from Denniston in Glasgow, so I went and joined Denniston Amateur Boxing Club with Jamie Cunningham, who, again, another great mate of mine now, top guy. And he entered me through the Scottish kind of, I suppose, boxing pathway, you could call it. And that started off with the Scottish Novice Championships. So I won that. Then a couple of months later, I had Western Districts come up, entered that, and I managed to win that as well. Then from there, I went on to intermediate, went on to the Scottish Elite Championships. Then off the back of that, I got selected to be a member of the Scottish Elite Boxing Group, which is based in Bridgeton in Glasgow. The national setup, went away to Russia, Thailand, Lithuania, all around England, all around Scotland, down in Sheffield with Scotland, training with the lads at GB. So I went down to a training camp in Brighton last August there, just after the kind of lockdown had lifted. So I got a lot of really good exposure, a lot of really good sparring, in with some of the top boys in St. Petersburg over in Russia, obviously in with some of the top boys in GB, Solomon Dacre, Courtney Bennett, Delicious Ori, sparring on all these lads and just learning. I mean, they've got a lot more experience than me. I've only ever had 15 amateur fights, so it was good to get that exposure, get kind of fast tracked to a certain extent. But like I say, when I got into this, that was never my plan. I never went, I'm going to become a part of the Scottish national team. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. It just kind of happened, and you just roll with it and go with it and see where it takes you.
Yeah, and obviously a few people have sort of, changed sports, stuff like that. I think the one that obviously springs to mind is Curtis Woodhouse giving up his football career and becoming a British champion. And he's been in the news a fair bit because he got his MBE or something recently. And I was watching a thing from the other day where he was talking about how, obviously he went from earning good money as a footballer, and obviously you had you were a rugby player, had an income from that, and then he sort of went to boxing. Suddenly you've got, camp expenses, and it's kind of, he talked about how it was a bit of a struggle financially to begin with. Was it kind of a tough adjustment in that regard? I mean, it must have been a bit of a risk financially to sort of give up the rugby career to go into boxing at that time.
No, definitely. I mean, I had done 2 years at university prior to getting my full-time, professional contract in rugby, but I'd never really had a proper job. Do you know what I mean? I'd never done that. So I actually got my personal training qualification. It just kind of made sense with my background and being involved in sport and stuff like that, and it worked quite well around trying to train in different things. I worked in a gym over in Jersey, Fitness First. I actually done some membership stuff for them as well. So I was trying to sell gym memberships, and then I was doing a wee bit of my own personal training on the side. Then moved away from that, focused on working on just doing my personal training over in Jersey. And it's an adjustment. Amateur boxing, there's no money in it unless you're a member of the GB squad or something like that, where you get funded. But unless you're in one of these funded programs, it's very much relying on yourself to come up with it. I'm lucky as well over in Jersey. I've got a couple of amazing sponsors who've really helped me. Biggest one of which is, you can see on my top, Stillage Net, and they've been brilliant. So that's kind of helped as well. When people get behind you, a couple of other local businessmen, Eddie Burns and Alexander Burnett, really helped. And it just helps with like costs for going away and trips, costs for travelling, everything. So it's an adjustment, but it's a struggle. You can't really, you've got to get up and go, and you've got to manage your time well. You've got to, it is a real adjustment.
Testament to the passion you got for the sport, that obviously you've stuck with it and been enjoying it, even if it was a struggle there. Obviously it seems like you made the sort of right call. The passion for it's still there, even doing it day in, day out, rather than just being a thought in the back of your mind.
No, well, listen, I never got into this for money. That's, I think things, especially in sport, if you get into it for money, it doesn't normally work out for you. I got into it because I had a passion for it, and because I really wanted to try and, challenge myself or test myself to do something else. So yeah, it was always a passion, first and foremost. It still is. I know I've turned professional in the paid ranks, but it's still not really about the money. I mean, that's all a byproduct of being successful in what you do. So I'm just kind of focused on trying to better myself as much as I can, push myself as much as I can. Hopefully Mark will, put me in the right kind of environments and the right sort of fights to learn and develop. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's another challenge again. I've been a professional rugby player, I've been an amateur boxer, now I'm a professional boxer. It's just something again, another challenge, who knows where it will take us, but it's all an experience, and hopefully in 20, 30, 40 years time, if I'm still here, I'll be able to sit down and talk to my grandkids about it and tell them a bit about what was involved and what happened. And it's exciting. It's a journey, and I'm happy that I can kind of live out my dream to a certain extent and see where it goes.
And I guess, the main thing being the sort of lifestyle of being an athlete, but what sort of things do you carry over from the rugby career and the rugby background to boxing? What sort of similarities or things do you carry through when you make that transition?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people kind of question but rugby's a very physical sport. In a lot of aspects, it's a lot more physical than boxing. The training's obviously completely different. Your body type changes because you don't need to be 125 kilos and bench and whatever it is and squat. Like, you don't need to do that. So, but obviously, like you say, my body's conditioned to training. So I'm used to being up early in the morning, out training, getting my strength and conditioning in, getting my cardio in, technical training in. I'm used to, I know what's required and how much time it takes to dedicate yourself to something, learn and develop. I think as well, obviously, because I've got that athletic background, picking things up is maybe not a bit easier, but I understand how my body works. So if somebody's, we're getting technical on how to throw a punch or feet work, or I feel as if I can, get into it a bit easier than somebody who's maybe not got that athletic background. Obviously, diet's a massive part of about any sport, so I'm pretty clued on when it comes to my nutrition, what I should be eating, when I should be eating it, how much I need of it. And yeah, just like basically, what's required to get yourself in shape. And I think that's one of the most important things in boxing. A lot of the time, especially at heavyweight, it's not about, who's the technically gifted for some, normally about who's in better condition. So obviously, as you go up the levels, then that's different. But especially from, my first sort of 10 fights, it's probably going to be about how conditioned I am and how much I'm taking in at the gym and how well I prepare for them. So I feel as if I've got enough knowledge and enough prior background and enough history to do that.
Yeah, and I think you won something like 11 of the 15 amateur fights. I think you got a Scottish amateur title. What was that? Sorry,
10 or 11, something like that. Yeah,
10 or 11. Yeah. Were you surprised how quickly you picked it up? How much success you had, or were you, once you were in the gym a few times, were you pretty confident?
Listen, like I say, I boxed when I was younger, so the muscle memory. I still had a little bit of the muscle memory. I knew, and I've watched a lot of boxing, so yourself when you watch something and you take it in. It's always easy to try and copy that and do that with your. Yeah. So I wasn't surprised that I managed to pick it up quickly, but I was definitely surprised that how I was able to get in the ring with some lads with so much more experience than me, and compete at that, or compete. So yeah, I suppose I was surprised to an extent at how it went. The other thing is as well, I mean, I'm 6'7" and 18 stone, and it's as they say, if somebody that size lands one on your chin, it's not much fun. So it was good to know that I've got a bit of punching power as well, and I can hurt people in the ring. So no, it was good. It was good. It was a good experience to get in there and know you could do it, know you could throw the punches, know you could adapt yourself to a different sport. It was I suppose I wouldn't say proud, but I had a bit of I was happy that I was managed to do it.
Yeah, you mentioned there your size and the punching power. For I guess a lot of people, you turn professional, we sort of watching you box for the first time. What can people expect when they see you box for the first time, do you think?
Listen, I'm obviously enough. Like I said, I've only had 15 fights and I've had 4 years experience in the sport. So my technical ability still go. I'm still developing. I'm still learning. I'm not punch perfect yet, but I'm 6'7", 18 stone, big reach. Like to use my jab. Like to impose myself. Like to box, but take it to whoever I'm fighting. I'm not a back foot boxer. I don't like to box in the back foot or anything like that. I'm not technically flashy or anything like that. It's very much, get in, get your work going, get the jab going, kind of try and grind people down.
And you touched on earlier some of the trips you went on. I think you said St. Petersburg, a bit of sparring out there, Thailand, Lithuania, stuff like that. I mean, yeah, you've certainly got in a few air miles so far. What are the sort of memories you got from some of those trips? I imagine some culture shocks going into some of those gyms and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, Russia probably is the biggest one. The boy Craig McAvoy, who's the head of the Scottish national team, his performance director, he actually lived over in Russia for a while, so he's got loads of contacts over in St. Petersburg. And I was actually surprised at how state-of-the-art all the gyms are. Honestly, like, I'm not outside of Sheffield. I don't think I've been in a better gym over in St. Petersburg. So first off, that was a bit of a shock. You kind of think Russia, it's going to be like Rocky IV, but it's not. They're ahead of the curve in a lot of aspects compared to some of the gyms in the UK. And then obviously I was in sparring a couple of their, the top boys in St. Petersburg. The boy Vlad, I can't remember his name. I don't want to pronounce it in case I embarrass myself. It was Vlad Murabin. Vlad. And anyway, he was there, Russian under-23 champion. I think I got about 15 rounds in with him the first time I was there. So it was a shock to the system because these boys are technical and they're big as well. They're not kind of blowing up heavyweights. They're proper super heavyweights. So it was an experience. Obviously, some of the camps I've been on as well. Like Thailand was a conditioning camp. So, fantastic over there with the weather, the heat, the humidity, and you were in training every day, going to different gyms. And Just, yeah, do you know what? It just sets you up for what comes later down the line. I mean, I was used to it to a certain extent from rugby, travelling and getting your head in the game and different things, but it's just a different environment and stuff. And just, yeah, you never know. You could be fighting abroad and stuff like that, and it might be a culture shock, and you just need to adapt to it straight away. So that was amazing learning experience.
And any regrets that you didn't sort of focus on the boxing a bit earlier, or pleased with the way you've gone about it?
Yeah, do you know what? Like, I feel, like I said at the beginning of the interview, I think if it wasn't for rugby, I wouldn't be here now. I probably wouldn't be having an interview with you if I hadn't played rugby. So I've got a lot to thank rugby for. Do you know what I mean? Like, I spent 8 years, made some amazing friends, some friends for life, some amazing experiences, met a lot of interesting people, made a lot of contacts and stuff like that. And like I say, I wouldn't have met my manager, Mark, had I not been playing in Jersey at the time or living in Jersey. Made all these contacts that I've managed to make. So, you could say, oh, regret not, but nah, like, I think it's fate. So that's just the way it's worked out, and I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it now. I'm quite happy with how everything's went, and I'm proud of what I've managed to achieve so far. Hopefully, we can achieve a wee bit more.
Yeah, and obviously turning professional, you say you didn't get in it for the money at all, and obviously you've come into the game quite late. Do you feel a little bit like kind of the pressure's off, really? You can, I guess no one's expecting someone who came into the sport so late to go on to achieve an awful lot, but you've come quite a long way so far. Does it feel kind of, are you putting pressure on yourself, or is it kind of the pressure's off going into the professional game?
There's no pressure. There's absolutely zero pressure. The only pressure I put on myself is to perform and to train hard and to better myself. But in terms of pressure of what people expect, I've already seen from some of the interviews and stuff I've done, some of the comments, and it just, it's brilliant. Like, it's just fuel the fire. But no, I know not that many people probably expect anything of me, so it's just my job to give them a shock in it and see what we can do. So that's brilliant. I don't put any pressure on myself. I said to Mark, or Mark said to me, there's never actually been a Scottish, British or Commonwealth heavyweight champion at pro, and obviously being a professional boxer now, you've got to, anybody, any boxer, any professional boxer, when they first get into it, it's got to have aspirations of one day being able to compete at that level. I know the type of boys who are mixing at that level now, they're not far away from world level. So I don't expect it to be easy, and I don't expect it to be something that, happens in the next year or 2 years. But it's something that I feel, if I dedicate myself to the sport like I have been and keep progressing and keep staying on the upward curve, who knows? And once, if you ever manage to achieve something like that, when we ever get that opportunity, nobody can ever take that away from you. So it would be amazing to try and achieve that.
And is it something that's always sort of spurred you on in your sort of life and sporting career, people sort of writing you off a bit and doubting your ability? You mentioned sort of comments on interviews and wanting to sort of prove those people wrong. Have you always had that sort of side to you that you've had that fuel you a little bit?
Definitely. I think, there's been certain things that have happened to me in the past in my rugby career, and it's always been some people deal with it different ways. I just see it as, that's great, let's prove you wrong. Let's show you what it's about. And at the end of the day, nobody can take it away from you if you give 100% and apply yourself to something. And I think that the age that we live in and how easy it is to get on the internet and comment and stuff, you've got to just take a lot of these comments with a pinch of salt. But I just use it for me, use it in a positive way. Don't look at it in a negative way, use it in a positive way. So that's brilliant. Like, it's good. Keeps me up, gets me up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go a run, gets me up at whatever time to go to the gym. So that's brilliant. I love it.
And you've got the sort of Glasgow Warrior as the nickname, and you mentioned becoming the first sort of Scottish heavyweight to become sort of British or Commonwealth champion. I mean, obviously Glasgow and Scotland have got sort of a fair bit of history in boxing, and growing up as a boxing fan, what are your sort of memories of boxing in Scotland? Did you sort of get to go to many shows and that growing up, or who did you sort of look up to when you were watching boxing?
I mean, Scott Harrison was the world champion when I was young. He used to fight at Braehead, so I can remember went to about 3 or 4 of his world title defences, world title challenges at Braehead, and watched him. That was obviously, a big inspiration. Out with that, I actually went and watched Mike Tyson when he fought at Hampden. He fought a guy, Lou Savary. he knocked him out in about 20 seconds. But me, my dad, and my granddad went to that and watched that. That was, a good, amazing experience. The hype around Mike Tyson was unbelievable. So just to even be there, I don't think I even got to see a punch thrown because everybody was standing up for the first 20 seconds. And I was only young, so I think I was standing up in my chair trying to see I couldn't see, but it was just amazing to be there. Lennox Lewis was obviously a hero growing up. He was the main man in the division. Joe Kozagi's always been a real, I loved watching Joe Kozagi. I went to watch him fight down in Cardiff. Ricky Hatton was obviously always a big name in Britain at the time. And then, so I've always had an interest. I've always loved watching British fighters and looking up old fights and watching old fight documentary movies and stories. And like I say, I just love the sport.
And you mentioned your dad and granddad taking you to that Mike Tyson fight and having a bit of history in the sport. What do they make of what you're doing now and choosing to go into boxing?
Well, unfortunately, my grandfather's no longer with us.
Sorry to hear that.
That's all right. Listen, it's he would probably be. I'm sure he's proud. He was a professional boxer. He left home when he was 14. Joined the booths in the circus, which was like the arranged fights. They would go up and it was like a big show business, a show that they got up and I'll challenge a guy and I'll fight him. So he had a tough upbringing. Done his national service when he was 19 for 2 years, fought over in Berlin just after the war had ended in the early 50s. And then he came out of the army and turned professional. And I think he fought at Paisley. He had a couple of fights down at Paisley Ice Rink. And apparently Muhammad Ali back in the 60s had an exhibition bout there. So I'm sure he'd be proud of me. He'd probably be telling me everything I was doing wrong, but I'm sure he's proud. My dad, again, the support I have from my family, especially my mum and dad's amazing. So I'm sure they kind of worry sometimes because, I wouldn't want to watch my child get punched in the head, but they probably worry about me. But they're behind me 100%. They give me a lot of support and I can't thank them enough for all their help and everything they've done so far for me.
Well, it certainly sounds like it's been a fascinating story so far, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Look forward to watching your pro career start, and hopefully it goes well. All the best. I'll be watching with interest.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.